Hi, welcome to Story Time with Gigi. Today we're going to be reading a story called Revolutionary Friends. It tells the story of General George Washington and the Marquis de Lafayette. The story is written by Selene Castrovilla and illustrated by Drazen Kozjan. That could be Kozjan. C'est le moment. Lafayette quivered with excitement. What a thrill to dine at City Tavern among American patriots he so admired. Was he dreaming? Mais non. Dreams do not offer the succulent aromas of fine dining or the sharp scent of dark ale. This was real. Magnifique. Having to choose between slavery that everyone believes he has the right to impose upon me and liberty which called me to glory, I departed. That's a quote from the Marquis de Lafayette explaining why he left France for America. "19-year-old Marie Joseph Paul Yves Roche Gilbert de Motier, Marquis de Lafayette, ventured a great deal to get there. He had always felt a call to glory. His heart enlisted when he learned of the American struggle. The rest of his body proved more difficult. The French king denied his request to leave. Au contraire, Lafayette paid for his own ship and slipped out of France, spending 54 stomach-wrenching days at sea. Then he had suffered a month of broken carriages, lame horses, and nightly mosquito raids as he trekked hundreds of miles." Another quote by the Marquis de Lafayette. "Never before had such a glorious cause attracted the attention of mankind. It was the final struggle of liberty, and its defeat would have left it neither asylum nor hope. When I first heard of the American Revolution, my heart was enlisted, and I thought only of joining the colors." Here he was, finally. And in the same room with the great George Washington. Très bien. City Tavern was jammed and humming with animated voices and a steady clinking of glasses. Lafayette spotted the 45-year-old commander-in-chief immediately. Washington's figure and manner separated him from the surrounding crowd. Lafayette had to meet him. Maintenant. Another quote from the Marquis de Lafayette. "General Washington came to Philadelphia, and Monsieur de Lafayette beheld for the first time that great man. Although he was surrounded by officers and citizens, it was impossible to mistake for a moment his majestic figure and deportment, nor was he less distinguished by the noble affability of his manner." And that was his comment on his very first meeting with George Washington. Washington was weary, his recent days hard. The British lay near. Were they readying to strike? Washington's ragtag troops could not match the hardy redcoats. Members of Congress badgered Washington. Why wasn't he preparing Philadelphia for attack? Peck, peck, peck. The voices pricked his brain. Washington was tired of sharing strategies with men deaf to reason. Now there was someone else to consider, tonight's guest, the young Frenchman who gawked in admiration. There was an important reason to treat Lafayette cordially. Of noble birth, he could improve relations with France, an ally America needed. This explained why Congress had given Lafayette an honorary position in the army. No salary and no command, only a major general's sash. Washington was prepared to discount Lafayette. The previous French recruits had been snobbish, bossy, and unwilling to learn English. On top of it all, Lafayette was scrawny and young and inexperienced. What possible good could he be? Still, it was in America's best interest to invite Lafayette into Washington's military family. You can kind of see the pressure General Washington was under. Here's another quote from the Marquis de Lafayette. The moment, although important to the common cause, was peculiarly unfavorable to strangers. The Americans were displeased with the pretentious and disgusted with the conduct of my Frenchmen. And that was his description of the atmosphere when he arrived in Philadelphia. Lafayette was blissfully unaware of Washington's opinions. He had adopted the motto, "Que non," why not? Having come this far, why not go further? Lafayette was anxious to be trained and eager to communicate. He had studied English while on the rough sea. He adored America and because Washington represented America, Lafayette idolized him. Washington approached. Enchanté. The commander complimented Lafayette on his noble spirit and the sacrifices he had made. He invited Lafayette to live in his quarters. Voila! To Lafayette, the cementing of their bond was as simple as that. A letter he wrote to his wife reads, I have a friend. That friend is General Washington, this excellent man whose talents and virtues I admired and whom I have learnt to revere as I have known him better, has now become my intimate friend. His affectionate interest in me instantly won my heart. I am established in his house, and we live together like two attached brothers, with mutual confidence and cordiality. This friendship renders me as happy as I can possibly be in this country. Lafayette charmed everyone at headquarters. Did that include Washington? Perhaps. But Washington had other matters on his mind. His army was in poor shape. Indeed, just days after they met, he invited Lafayette to review the troops. An embarrassment. 11,000 ill-armed, barely clothed men who did not look ready to fight. Now, in his description of the inspection of the troops, the Marquis de Lafayette said, "We must feel embarrassed," said General Washington, "to exhibit ourselves before an officer who just quitted French troops. It is to learn and not to teach that I come hither," replied Marquis de Lafayette, and that modest tone, which was not common in Europeans, produced a very good effect. The British, however, were ready and close. 200 English warships had landed only a few miles away. Une situation grave. Lafayette saw the fear in the Philadelphians' faces. He observed Washington carefully. What would the commander do? Une situation grave means it was a very serious situation, a grave situation. Washington needed to raise spirits. His troops would parade through the streets, drums and fifes in quick step, green sprigs and hats. In front, Washington on horseback, and beside him, Lafayette. A parade was bon, but Lafayette wanted a command. Burning to prove himself, he nagged Washington and Congress. S'il vous plaît, please. And the Marquis de Lafayette, in describing the parade, their heads covered with green branches and marching to the sound of drums and fifes, these soldiers, in spite of their state of nudity, offered an agreeable spectacle to the eyes of all the citizens. Washington was experiencing an emotion he didn't often feel. He had grown fond of Lafayette. Washington appealed to Congress. Would they give the Marquis a chance? Congress refused. Washington sat Lafayette down. He apologized for the distress the young man felt. Although he had no power to grant a command, Washington did have affection to offer. He told Lafayette to think of him as a friend and father. A father! Quel bonheur! Quel honneur! Lafayette was touched in the deepest way. But could he ever experience his glory? Just after his 20th birthday, the chance came. So the Marquis de Lafayette was only 19 when he arrived. On September 11th, the British were coming. Zut alors! Advancing through Brandywine Creek, 30 miles outside Philadelphia. Washington was determined to block them. But where in the creek would the British cross? There were so many fords. Washington knew of some. Did the British know of others? Worse, a heavy fog had set in that morning. Spotting the enemy would prove impossible. At headquarters, near a main ford, Lafayette waited with Washington for word. The news, devastating. The British had broken through several of Brandywine's fords. The American troops were panicking. Lafayette was on fire to join in. He requested permission from Washington. Washington stared at Lafayette. The Americans were outnumbered, and even with the reinforcements he had just sent, the Marquis could get himself killed. But he looked so excited to prove himself, Washington told him to proceed. Through the smoky haze and British musket blasts, Lafayette spotted terrified American soldiers fleeing. Sacre bleu! There was only one thing to do. Lafayette dismounted. He raced into the ranks, a one-man rallying tour de force. Sparked by Lafayette's courage, the soldiers returned to the fight. With renewed vigor, they advanced. The noises were deafening, weapons blasting, wounded mid screaming, and the scent of gunpowder suffocating. Mon Dieu! A ball passed through Lafayette's left leg. Oh, the pain! But he waged on, ignoring the fiery spasms. Until, now here's a quote from the Battle of Brandywine by the Marquis de Lafayette. The enemy united all their fire upon the center. The confusion became extreme, and it was whilst Marquis de Lafayette was rallying the troops that a ball passed through my leg. Here's the British. So he kept firing forward, ignoring the spasms, until the returning American forces gave way and headed into the woods. Blood spilled from his boot. He needed help. Immédiatement. Giamat, his aide, appeared at his side and hastily wrapped the wound. The enemy was near. They were closing in. Lafayette was almost taken. Giamat found a horse and boosted Lafayette up. Allez! His leg throbbing in protest, Lafayette rode 12 miles to a stone bridge on the heels of the frenzied retreating American troops. He stopped them and established a degree of order. Duties done, Lafayette dropped from pain, from exhaustion. The Americans had lost, but they'd fight another day. Carried to a house nearby, Lafayette lay on a table. His wound needed dressing. In tramped Washington and his officers, weary and ravenous. Lafayette managed a joke, asking not to be eaten. Washington was grave. There were enough casualties that day. He would not lose Lafayette. He could not lose him. He instructed the doctor, "Take charge of him as if he were my son, for I love him with the same affection." And this is more telling the story. They wrote letters. The Marquis de Lafayette spent many days visiting at Mount Vernon. He had a room that was all set aside for him. More facts and figures. He mourned the loss of his friend and father and returned to America one last time for just over a year in anticipation of the nation's 50th anniversary celebration of American independence. He visited Washington's tomb at Mount Vernon alone in the underground chamber. Lafayette wept. Adieu, mon général, adieu. And that's our story. I hope you liked it. Make sure that you like and subscribe and share with your friends. Bye until next time.